Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Hello, friends. I hope this finds you in good health and secure. Thank you for your support. Always liking and subscribing is your Bodhisattva, simplest few seconds Bodhisattva act to grow the Sangha and propagate this resource, yes? We left off still in chapter 1 of the Lotus Sutra, the BDK translation from Kumarajiva's Chinese translation. Manjushri is addressing Maitreya, and we'll just jump right into it, okay? To those seeking for the Shravaka vehicle, learning, right? He taught the Dharma with respect to the Four Noble Truths, causing them to overcome birth, old age, illness, and death, and to attain nirvana. This is a really often repeated statement, but you understand that that is the beginnings of the understanding of the cycle of birth and death, moment to moment, right? Cycle, birth, rebirth, right? Basically, it's all rebirth, but every rebirth has a death and then another rebirth. We keep reinstantiating, yeah? But we begin with the samsaric reality of our experience of stress, anxiety, pain, suffering, right? He taught the Dharma with respect to dependent origination to the Pratyeka Buddhas. So for those who not only learning is that hearing the voice of Buddha, right, the call to enlightenment, if you will, Pratyeka Buddhas inculcating the teachings to manifest as much as they can the Buddha way. He teaches dependent origination, which, if you look it up in my books or in, I should check and make sure it's in Buddhism reference. It should be. It's part of, you'll find it in there in its many forms. In the 9 consciousnesses, we talk about it. In the Nidana, certainly, right, which is what dependent origination is. Right, the process, what I call the engine of life. But in its earlier forms, to the Pratyeka Buddhas, it was the Nidana, yeah? And to the Bodhisattvas, he taught the Dharma with respect to the 6 perfections, paramitas, causing them to attain highest complete enlightenment and perfect all knowledge, right? Sarvajnata. And this was about attaining the Buddha-ness, the Buddha mind, while remaining a samsaric human being, right? Then there was another Buddha named Kandrasurya Pradipa, and after him another Buddha also named Kandrasurya Pradipa, same name, and so on. So in this way, 20,000 Buddhas all had the same name, Kandrasurya Paradipa. They also had the same family name, Bharadvaja. It's an interesting device. Basically, Buddha is Buddha. Enlightenment is enlightenment. Although we carry different identities, right, identifications, when we reach our 9th consciousness, we all reach perfect knowledge, complete knowledge. That doesn't change from person to person, right? That's why it's a universal truth. O Maitreya, you should know that these Buddhas, beginning from the first up to the last, all had the same name, Kandrasurya Pradipa, endowed with the 10 epithets. The Dharma that they taught was good in the beginning, the middle, and the end. The last Buddha fathered 8 princes before he renounced household life. The first was called Mati. You know what renouncing household life means, right? So it's interesting that he states it in this way. So he talks about him being a Buddha, and then he says he had 6 children before he renounced household life, kind of going back in time there, and saying renouncing household life is pursuing the life of a bodhisattva, to attain enlightenment, to become Buddha in mind, yes? So it's an interesting way to say that. The first was called Mati, the second Sumati, the third Anattamati, the fourth Ratimati, and the fifth was called Visesamati. The sixth, Vimatismudagantin, ooh, there's a deviation, and the seventh, Gosamati, back to form. And the eighth was called Dharmamati. These 8 princes were endowed with dignity and power, which is our goal in Buddhist practice, right? Or some of the goal. And each of them ruled over 4 great continents. Having heard their father, had renounced household life, and obtained highest complete enlightenment, so they're all bodhisattvas. All of them abandoned their kingdoms and also renounced household life. Each caused the spirit of the Mahayana to arise within him, practiced the pure path of discipline and integrity, and became an expounder of the Dharma. They all planted roots of good merit under many thousands of myriads of Buddhas. At that time, the Buddha Kandrasurya Pradipa taught the Mahayana Sutra called Immeasurable Means, the instruction for the bodhisattvas and treasured lore of the Buddhas. Having taught this sutra, he sat down, cross-legged, undisturbed in body and mind, among the great assembly, and entered the samadhi called the abode of immeasurable meanings. So this is all alliteration about the practice, really, and how we set about preparing for the Lotus Sutra. The immeasurable meanings opens that door. You heard, instructing bodhisattvas. Here's your full level of perfect, complete enlightenment. This is how you do it, just as I did, right? Then Mandarava, and remember, these are the preparatory chapters. We haven't gotten to the essential yet. So this is all preparatory training for the essential, the Honmon section of the Lotus Sutra. But we are in the Lotus Sutra, so the rhetoric is a little different than we've ever read before, right? It's a direct experience being discussed. The Mandarava and Great Mandarava flowers, Manjusaka and Great Manjusaka flowers, fell like rain from the skies, scattering over the Buddhas and all of his attendants, the Buddha and all of his attendants. And the whole Buddha world quaked in 6 ways. At that time, all in that assembly of humans and non-humans, monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, devas, nagas, yaksha, gandharas, ashuras, garudas, kimnaras, mahorragas, kings and noble emperors, having experienced such an unprecedented marvel, were filled with joy, and pressing their palms together, they gazed attentively at the Buddha. Now, I want you to consider for a second what happens when we chant to our proper Nichiren mandala. Right? Many of you have reported to me that the mandala will seem to come apart, shift, jiggle, become 3-dimensional, all these different experiences of the mandala as we focus on it. Here's the thing, when that happens, some call it fusion with mandala. What it is not fusion with the mandala, it's fusion with our Gohonzon mind. Because once you rattle that cage, once you open that door of our 9th consciousness, right? Then the solidity that we assign to everything comes into question. What we begin to observe is the process of moment-to-moment instantiation, the engine of life. Our brain is going through a retraining. You know, neuroplasticity, our brain is starting to understand this amazing process of the engine of life. This is the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, the opening of complete perfect understanding, Buddha-ness. So be grateful when you experience that. Don't be scared. It's part of entering the door, going through the gate. Attentively gaze at the Buddha. What we're essentially doing via the mandala is gazing through our eye, our Gohonzon mind, Buddha. That's exactly what it says. Then the Buddha emitted a ray of light from the tuft of white hair between his eyebrows, which completely illuminated all the 18,000 worlds in the east in the same way that all the Buddha worlds are visible now, right? Why is all the Buddha world visible now? Because you're in Buddha mind. You're in Buddha-ness. So you see without limitation. See mentally, yes? O Maitreya, you should know that at the time there were 20 kotas of bodhisattvas in the assembly who wanted to hear the Dharma. How do you do this? We have to know, right? All of these bodhisattvas, having seen all the Buddha worlds completely illuminated by this ray of light, were struck with wonder and wanted to know why it was emitted. Why do you need to know why? Be in it. You understand you want it, so be in it. Why? Okay, not there yet. A bodhisattva named Varaprabha was there with his 800 disciples, popular guy. At that time, the Buddha, Kandrasurya Pradipa, I will learn this word, by that time we'll move on to another, having emerged from samadhi, remained sitting for 60 intermediate kalpas and revealed to Bodhisattva Varaprabha the Mahayana Sutra called the Sadharma Pundarika. Do you remember what that is? That's Sanskrit for Lotus Sutra. The White Lotus of the Marvelous Law, hereafter Lotus Sutra, which was the instruction for bodhisattvas and the treasured lore of the Buddhas. The assembly also sat there undisturbed in body and mind, listening to the Buddha's exposition for 60 intermediate kalpas as if only a single mealtime had passed. This is just evidence or hyperbole explicating that the teachings are so voluminous in meaning that you can be overwhelmed by the amount of information, the amount of insights, the amount of rattling your very bones, the earth shakes in 6 directions, just ominous. The volume, the majesty, the amazement of what the mind is capable of, right? And while you're grappling with the full grandeur of it, it's only taken a few moments to talk about it. But it feels like you've just space traveled through time, right? This is the depth, the profundity of this teaching. During that time, not a single person among them experienced fatigue of body or mind, because they were so charged with energy, yeah? Having taught this sutra for 60 intermediate kalpas, the Buddha Kandrasyapradipa made this proclamation to the assembly of Brahmas, Maras, Sramanas, Brahmins, Devas, humans, and Asuras, saying, on this day, during the middle watch of the night, the Tathagata will enter nirvana without residue. Remember, if you look in Buddhism reference, I'll have listed under nirvana 2 types of nirvana, one with remainder, one without. That's what that's a reference to. Yeah. Then the Buddha Kandrasurya Paradipa gave this prediction to Bodhisattva Srigarbha. Addressing the monks, he said, this Bodhisattva Srigarbha will become the next Buddha after me. He will be called Vimalagantaka netra. A Tathagata, Arhat, completely enlightened. See, this is a contradiction from early teachings, equating a Tathagata and an Arhat as completely enlightened. There's a lot of, how do the English say it? Controversy over that. But I'll leave that to your study. I'm not going to argue that today. The Buddha, after having made this prediction, entered nirvana without residue during the middle of the night. After the Buddha passed into extinction, Bodhisattva Varaprabha, having preserved the Lotus Sutra, taught it to humans for the full period of 80 intermediate kalpas. This Bodhisattva Varaprabha was made the teacher for the Buddha Chandrasurya Pradipa and his 8 princes. Varaprabha led and inspired them and caused them to be firm in highest complete enlightenment. After paying homage to innumerable hundreds of thousands of myriads of kotas of Buddhas, all these princes attained the path of the Buddhas. The last of these to become enlightened was Dimapkara. Among the 800 disciples of Bodhisattva Varaprabha, there was a man named Vasaskama, who was attached to profit. Even though he had repeatedly recited the sutras, he never became versed in them and forgot the greater part. That is why he was called Yasaskama, quote, fake seeker. But because he had also planted various roots of good merit, he was able to meet innumerable hundreds of thousands of myriads of kotas of Buddhas, who he rendered homage to, honored, revered, and praised. For himself, he was distracted by profit, by success monetarily. Relevant for today. O Maitreya, you should know that Bodhisattva Varaprabha at that time was none other than myself, and Bodhisattva Yasaskama was none other than you. The marvel we see here is exactly the same as the previous one. Therefore, I am certain that today the Tathagata will teach the Mahayana Sutra called the Lotus Sutra, the instruction for bodhisattvas and treasured lore of the Buddhas. Thereupon Manjushri, wanting to explain the meaning of this further, spoke to the great assembly in verse. And this is the part of these teachings, the sermon that is specific to this chapter, this teaching, because it's the one most easily memorized and transferred via oral mouth, right? I remember that in the past, innumerable incalculable kalpas ago, there was a Buddha, the best of humans, called Chandrasurya Pradipa. This Bhagavat taught the Dharma, leading and inspiring innumerable sentient beings and incalculable numbers of bodhisattva to attain the wisdom of the Buddhas. Before renouncing household life, the Buddha fathered 8 princes. Having seen the great sage renounced household life, they also followed him and practiced the pure path of discipline and integrity. At that time, the Buddha taught the extensively illuminated the Mahayana Sutra called the Immeasurable Meanings. To the great assembly, after having taught this sutra, the Buddha sat down cross-legged on the seat of Dharma and entered the samadhi called the abode of the immeasurable meanings. The heavenly mandara flowers fell down like rain. The heavenly drums resounded spontaneously. All the devas, nagas, yakshas paid homage to the best of humans. All of the Buddha worlds suddenly quaked greatly, and the Buddha emitted a ray of light from the tuft between his eyes and manifested various marvels. This ray of light illuminated the 18,000 Buddha worlds in the east and revealed the conditions resulting from the karma of each sentient being. Through this light of the Buddha, all the Buddha worlds appeared as if they were decorated with various jewels such as lapis lazuli or crystal. All the devas, humans, nagas, yakshas, gandharas, and kimnaras, were each seen paying homage to the Buddhas. All the Tathagatas who had spontaneously attained the path of Buddhas looked majestic and very beautiful, with bodies like golden mountains. Each Bhagavat appeared like a golden image in the midst of lapis lazuli, expounding the meaning of the profound Dharma to the great assembly. There were innumerable Shravakas in each of the Buddha worlds, and they saw all the assemblies because of the light of the Buddha. You see how this is being interpreted now? With less verbiage, you're getting the point. This is all about one leader, Buddha, enabling all of his students, his listeners, to experience Buddha-ness, to raise their minds to enlightenment for the purpose of the goal of enlightenment, preparing them for the teaching that will lead them through a simple method for attainment. We're not there yet, but this is all preparatory, right? There were also monks living in mountain forests who, through persistence, possessed purity of conduct, which they protected like a precious jewel. There were bodhisattvas as numerous as the sands of the Ganges, practicing by giving dana, perseverance, ksanti, and so on, i.e. the six perfections, yeah, who also became visible through the light of the Buddha. There were bodhisattvas who, having entered deep samadhi, were tranquil and undisturbed in body and mind, and who were seen seeking for the highest path. There were also bodhisattvas who, knowing the tranquil character of the Dharma, were seen teaching the Dharma and seeking the path of the Buddhas in each of the Buddha worlds. At that time, in other words, propagating the teaching, right? At that time, the Fourfold Assembly, having seen the Buddha Kandra Surya Pradipa manifest these great transcendental powers, became delighted and asked each other what the reason for this could be. The noble one, revered by devas and humans, then emerged from samadhi and praised Bodhisattva Varaprabha, saying, "You are the eye of the world. You are believed in by all and possess the treasure house of the Dharma." What would that treasure house become later in the sutra? The treasure tower, right? Hold on. You are the only one who can understand the Dharma that I have taught. Wow. The Bhagavat praised Varaprabha, delighting him, and taught this Lotus Sutra for the full period of 60 intermediate kalpas without rising from his seat. This expounder of the Dharma, Varaprabha, firmly and completely preserved this most excellent Dharma that was taught by the Buddha. After having taught this Lotus Sutra and having then gladdened the assembly, on that very day, the Buddha told the assembly of devas and humans, "I have already taught you the meaning of the essential character of all the dharmas. Today I will enter nirvana. In the middle of the night, exert yourselves attentively and rid yourself of negligence." Don't be lazy. The Buddhas are extremely hard to meet and can be encountered only once in kotis of kalpas. So again, that carrot. And the Buddhas aren't a bunch of people you go find. They're Buddha in your mind. Those are the Buddhas, yours, mine, everyone's, right? So it's going to take effort, is what that means. All the sons of the Bhagavat, on hearing the Buddha was to enter nirvana, became sad, thinking, why will the Buddha enter nirvana so soon? Well, this presages the Nirvana Sutra, right? Everybody gathered around him as he was dying and like, what are we going to do when you're gone? Remember? The noble Lord, the king of the Dharma, consoled the innumerable beings, right? There's innumerable again, because the point is that this assembly is ongoing through time, never ending. Every one of us with our own insights and paths, quote unquote. Do not fear after I enter nirvana. This bodhisattva Srigarbha has fully realized the true character of freedom from corruption. And after me, he will become a Buddha named Vimalagannetra. And then he will bring immeasurable sentient beings to the path. So in this way, Buddha, the teachings of Buddha, they never go away. Buddha is not a person. It's a dharma. It's something we aspire to accomplish, right? If you know that, then this easily makes sense. If you start tracking a timeline with all these names in it, you'll go nuts. That's not the purpose. And that night the Buddha entered nirvana. Like a fire that goes out when the wood is exhausted, his relics were disturbed and distributed. Disturbed, that didn't make sense. His relics were distributed, and innumerable stupas were built. There were monks and nuns as numerous as the sands of the Ganges River, who increased their efforts, there it is, and sought for the highest path. How are we doing time-wise? Okay, we can go a bit further. This expounder of the Dharma, Varaprabha, possessed of the treasure house of the Buddha, extensively proclaimed the Lotus Sutra. For 80 intermediate kalpas, all of the 8 princes, led and inspired by Varaprabha, became firmly established in the highest path and met innumerable Buddhas. After having paid homage to the Buddhas and following them in their practice of the great path, they all in turn received their predictions, becoming Buddhas in succession. The last Buddha, the highest of Devas, was called Dipamkara. I might as well go to the finish here. I think that'll be the end. Yeah. And as the leader of all the sages, had brought innumerable sentient beings to the path, this expounder of the Dharma, Varaprabha, had one disciple who was lazy and attached to fame and fortune. Here's another, right? Another fable of sorts, another caution. This disciple ceaselessly sought these things and amused himself from house to house. He abandoned recitation of the sutras. And I laugh because anyone who's practiced Lotus Sutra Buddhism for some time, according to Nichiren doctrine on recitations, the 3 different types of recitations, we've all had doubt and, put it aside for a little while only to return to it because we have to. Once you experience some awakening, you can only stay away from it for so long before you realize, oh man, I'm going back to the old me. I already forgot about the old me, and here it is again. Yikes. Gotta start practicing again, right? So he abandoned recitation of the sutras. So it's nothing new, right? 3,000 years ago. And forgetting them, never became versed in them. For this very reason, he was named Yasakama. But since he had also performed many good deeds, he was able to meet innumerable Buddhas. He paid homage to all these Buddhas, and having practiced the great path after them, acquired all the 6 perfections, and now meets the lion of the Shakyas. The lion of the Shakyas. Who do you suppose that is? The Shakyas. That's where Shakya Muni comes from, right? He shall subsequently become a Buddha called Maitreya. Wow. Who will extensively bring innumerable sentient beings to the path. After the parinirvana of that Buddha Krandra Suryapradipa, the lazy one was none other than you, and the expounder of the Dharma, Varaprabha, was no one but myself. They don't take very long to explore a hyperbolic kind of fairy tale and then bring it right back to, I'm talking about you and me. And this is the nature of all the teachings of Buddhism. So keep that in mind, right? When I saw the Buddha Dipamkara, he also revealed this marvel of light. This is why I know that this Buddha will now teach the Lotus Sutra. This sign is just like the previous marvel. It is the skillful means of all the Buddhas. The Buddha has now emitted this ray of light in order to reveal the essential character of dharmas. Now it should be clear to everyone. Wait attentively, with palms pressed together, hands folded. Having reigned the Dharma, the Buddha will satisfy those seeking the path. If there is anyone seeking the three vehicles who still has any doubts, the Buddha will completely remove them, extinguishing them with none left over. And that statement refers to the three paths previously thought of as ways to perfect enlightenment reduced to this one vehicle. There are not two, there are not three. Remember? We'll come across it again. So that first introductory chapter kind of prepared us for the second chapter, Skillful Means, which we will start in the next video. Interesting, right? It's notable, I think, to see that no matter what translation we read of the, real, what should I call them, credited or accreditable translations of the Lotus Sutra, the message still, it comes through no matter how manipulated the translations might be about certain ancient words. You have to realize in many languages, some of the concepts contained in words, like Sanskrit, was not just a simple language. It was a language of tones and inflections and very meaningful concepts in words. They like to construct word sentences, in fact, to make sure that the meaning was captured, like the names. So to try to translate that into another language can be mutable, yeah? I believe every scholar has tried to capture the meaning as truthfully as possible, but everyone's different. So their truth and their way of seeing that meaning may use different adjectives, verbs, noun, blah, blah, blah. But if you're looking toward the meaning, it's the same. I haven't seen anything really deviate that far. Where the trap that can happen is if you're hung up on the rhetoric, the words, and it takes you into, other places outside Buddhism. That's unfortunate. So be alert for that. Anyway, thank you for listening. Second chapter tomorrow. And as always, be kind to yourself. Take care of your health. Right? Keep studying. Keep your practice strong. That's the most important thing. And I will see you in the next one. All the links in the description for multiple ways of supporting this effort. I appreciate you greatly. Bye for now.